just can I advise members that the committee meeting will be recorded and broadcast throughout Parliament buildings and online, and members are welcome to use mobile phone devices or mobile devices as long as they are in airplane mode and all devices are muted. So apologies, as I've mentioned, the Chair, Declan, won't be here. Moving on to item number 2, Chair's business. So members, as you will note from the agenda, the Minister will be joining us this morning to brief the committee of his intention to seek accelerated passage in relation to Finn's Law and the development of the Green Growth Strategy. Members, you'll be aware of the Speaker's kind offer to the ERA Committee for the issuing of tickets to COP26. So the Clerk had been in contact with members to confirm availability, so I note that some members have taken up that opportunity. So are members content then, just on the basis of that, to write to the Speaker's office formally thanking him for giving priority to members of the ERA Committee for the COP26 passes? Yep, happy enough with that. So number 3 then on our agenda is the draft minutes. Can I refer members to the draft minutes from the meeting on the 7th of October 2021 at page 6. Can I seek agreement from members on those? Okay, so I'm just going to sign them before we move on. Okay, so that's done. Matters arising then. Do any members have any matters arising from the minutes? No, all happy. So then just moving swiftly on to item number 5, the ministerial briefing today on the accelerated passage for Finn's Law and also then an update on the Green Growth Strategy. So Minister, thank you very much for coming along. You're very, very welcome. I also welcome Tracy. And I think online we maybe have Aaron and Kevin as well from the department. Minister, I'd like to hand the meeting over to yourself to brief us on the accelerated passage for Finn's Law and the Green Growth Strategy, and then we'll invite members on to ask you questions.
Thank you very much, Chair, and good morning, committee members, and thank you for the invitation to be here today. Appreciate the opportunity to meet with you and continue to engage as we move forward on a number of issues. So last week my officials provided you with an overview of the findings from the public consultation on the Animal Welfare Service Animals Bill, commonly known as Finn's Law, as well as an update on the way forward for the legislation. Almost 98% of the respondents were in favour of the policy proposals as set out in the consultation, and I was delighted that the committee members were very happy to add their backing for this bill as well. That support is appreciated and only serves to underline how keen everyone is to see the new law in place. Chair, you also noted that I had written to you in committee seeking support to use accelerated passage mechanism for the bill, and as my letter stated that it's not a normal process for such a bill. However, in this instance, I believe there are robust reasons for using accelerated passage. I appreciate that by seeking accelerated passage, the committee may not have the opportunity to scrutinise the draft bill in the detail that it would wished. However, the bill is uncontroversial, proposes simple amendments to the Welfare of Animals Act, which mirror the changes in place in other parts of the UK, and there is nothing in the bill which could be classified as contentious, novel or repercussive. The matter was debated at length in the Assembly in February 2020 and received unanimous support from all 5 parties. Main parties, and I'm conscious, though, that there is limited time left in the lifetime of the Assembly, and therefore feel it's right to use all of the tools at my disposal to introduce this bill and make this piece of legislation as speedily as possible, especially when the law change had such a significant level of backing from this committee, MLAs in the Chamber and animal welfare organisations and the public in general. The timetable for this bill is tight, but by using accelerated passage I believe I can alleviate some of the pressure and ensure that legislation is updated. I'd also like to update you on the progress of the Green Growth Strategy and use this opportunity to thank the committee for your continued engagement and support during its development stage. My officials have consulted and updated the committee on a number of occasions, providing both written and oral briefing on progress and timelines. This included receiving feedback from the committee on the initial strategy framework documented in March, providing committee with the first draft of the strategy itself in August, and you'll have received the latest draft. As well as engaging with the area committee, my officials have engaged with a number of key stakeholders, including the Green Growth Forum and young people. We also sought advice from neighbouring administrations in the UK and Republic of Ireland and from the Climate Change Committee. The interministerial group, which was set up to reflect this partnership and collaboration, the collaborative nature of green growth, has resulted in us working towards a shared goal and further demonstrating the ambition and desired outcomes of the green growth strategy. Further to this, the Strategic Oversight Group, which consists of senior civil servants from across government departments, has been integral to shaping the draft green growth strategy. This collaborative approach and level of engagement is a key aspect of the green growth strategy. Without all of us working closer together, it just won't work. By way of example, the energy strategy, an executive strategy which is being led on by the Department for Economy, is in the final stages of completion and provides an ambitious pathway to decarbonising energy. The strategy covers almost 60% of our total emissions and forms an important part of Northern Ireland's overall plan to addressing climate change. We simply must work together on these important issues, and I'm pleased to say that we have been liaising closely with the team leading on the development of the energy strategy, and has an important role to play in achieving our green growth goals. As I'm sure you're fully aware, the green growth strategy is Northern Ireland's Executive's multi-decade strategy, balancing climate, environment and economy in Northern Ireland, sets out the long-term vision and a solid framework for tackling the climate crisis in the right way. The version of the strategy that you received in August has, as you'd imagine, further developed following feedback and comments received from members of the Green Growth Interministerial Group, Strategic Oversight Group and senior officials in other departments. The strategy now includes key chapters, including re-imaging our future, balancing climate, environment and green jobs, pathway to a low-emissions society, transition in the right way from policy to delivery, and measuring and monitoring progress. An important alteration to note includes a consolidation of the executive commitments from 20 to 10. This now provides a much more focused, achievable and tangible set of commitments, which provide a framework for implementing positive change across government departments. We also see feedback to say that the strategy was too focused on climate change and didn't include enough on environment and economy. So that too has been rectified and the strategy is now much more balanced in that respect. You will note too that consultation questions have also been added. On implementing the commitments and principles as set out in the Green Growth Strategy, we must also ensure that transition to a more sustainable economy is fair and just for everyone. A just transition is at the heart of the draft Green Growth Strategy. We aim to have executive-approved draft Green Growth Strategy launched ahead of COP26, which, as I'm sure you all know, is taking place in Glasgow in November. This has been an extremely challenging deadline, but a deadline which has helped to focus the minds and provided us with a robust timeline. Without it, we may not be in our current position of having the draft Green Growth Strategy at such an advanced stage, so that I am grateful. The consequences of this time frame has resulted in a shorter turnaround time than we would have liked, but I am sincerely grateful to everyone who has provided input and contributed to what will be such an important strategy for the people of Northern Ireland now and in future generations. Synchronising our draft strategy with COP26 provides a unique opportunity for us to highlight at a national and global level the priority that Northern Ireland is placing on tackling the climate emergency and the balanced approach we are taking. I think it is something that for all of us to be proud of. I've also made it a priority to develop and bring forward a Northern Ireland Executive Climate Change Bill, which is well informed based on the best available and sound evidence and science. I understand that Colin Breeden and his team are briefing the committee later today, and I'll leave it to them to provide you with the relevant details. However, I believe my bill gives us the best chance of making the necessary changes to tackle climate change head-on and in a way that achieves the right balance between reducing emissions, protecting and enhancing our environment, and ensuring that we have a thriving agriculture sector and economy in general. Following executive approval, we intend to officially launch the draft Green Growth Strategy. That launch will also kickstart a period of public consultation on the draft strategy. Along with online consultation, we'll also be holding a number of public consultation sessions and one-to-one stakeholder engagements to make sure that we hear the views on what people agree with, what they don't, and what we can do to make it better. As well as this, the Climate Action Plan is currently being developed. It will identify sectoral pathways, establish emissions reduction targets and outline the actions required to deliver on the commitments within the Green Growth Strategy. The strategy is a big step forward for Northern Ireland as we move from a high to low emission society and we balance climate action with environmental and economic considerations. Balancing the three elements may add complexity to the challenge of addressing climate change, but I believe that holistic green growth approach is right for Northern Ireland. I believe that it presents us with a tremendous opportunity which can help us to rebuild our economy following the COVID-19 crisis. We have the potential for a green revolution right here, right now in Northern Ireland. And through investment, research and development, innovation and working together, we can really make a difference, not just for today, but for future generations to come. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Minister, for providing the update on both those issues. We'll just start asking some questions. I mean, we are, as you said, getting a briefing from the department later on today on the department's climate bill. But I think most people looking at the green growth strategy would perhaps be a wee bit confused. I mean, certainly I am, because there is a significant proportion of what's contained in the green growth strategy seems to have come from the private members' climate bill number 1. I'm looking at, for example, the development of climate action plans with sector-specific greenhouse gas emissions on a 5-yearly basis. There's also, in the green growth strategy, as outlined by yourself, the framework for a just transition. There's also a commitment to working on a transboundary nature on this island with the South regarding decarbonisation. So a lot of people would be looking at this and thinking this is really good that it's included in the green growth strategy, but why is it not included on a legislative basis within your department's climate bill? Why is this not been given legislation rather than just being part of a strategy? So, I mean, on the basis of that, can maybe I ask you, so what has included your desire to have a just transition within the green growth strategy, but it's not included in your bill? And also, I mean, just following on from that, because you've included now a just transition commission, but you've taken out the commitment to have a dedicated green growth climate action fund. So I'm not just sure how one plays with the other. So, I mean, if you could just sort of answer all of that.
Yeah, sure, not a problem. Now we have, of course, written to the key sponsor of the climate change legislation, Claire Bailey, on the first bill, the private members bill, and have indicated compromises in that letter. So I think that is reflective of that. We await a response to that letter that was sent some time ago. And we await a response to that. But I think it's a demonstration that this department wants to work with Assembly members, indeed with this committee, and be reflective of things that they are putting to us, on the one hand, whilst being realistic on the other.
So can I kind of stretch what you're saying to suggest that you seem to be indicating the likes of these things you would consider legislating for within your own climate bill?
Every piece of legislation is subject to amendment, and we will be entirely reasonable when it comes to amendment on the executive bill. I think it's important that we reflect on that. I should say that whenever the OLC came to the executive committee with reference to the private members bill, their words was that it was inoperable and totally unaffordable. So whenever you get the Office of the Legislative Council sending a warning like that there, it's important that people pay attention to that and listen.
Yeah, but even with you saying that, you are, as it were, feeling some of the clothes of the first bill to insert within this green growth strategy.
I would have thought that would be welcomed by the committee.
I am welcome it, but you seem to be contradicting. So, I mean, I'm just saying this is a positive step, but it's still within the strategy. What I seem to be suggesting is that it would be great if this would end up in a climate bill as it is in with the first climate bill.
Yeah, I always said the climate change legislation, it gives you a framework, but the green growth was actually the engine, was actually the driving force of doing things. And so in many respects, green growth strategies is even more important than the legislation, because it is the doing piece of it. Therefore, if we're trying to reflect an approach in the green growth strategy, which is, very clear on tackling climate change, but not just on tackling climate change, on tackling other environmental issues. But then on the other hand saying there's an economy that exists in Northern Ireland that we need to support as well, because people need jobs to put food on their table. And people need jobs to put a roof over their heads. We need to ensure that we can tackle these climate issues and environmental issues, at the one time. And, I would see this as a great opportunity to actually massively improve our water quality. And the improvement of water quality is good for everyone. It's also very good for tourism, because we will have better rivers for those people who want to come and fish in them. So all of these things are coming together. So, the green growth strategy, I want it to be as holistic as possible. So we can go out and take the climate change issues head on, but also create a much better environment in terms of our water and air quality.
Okay, thank you. So I'm just going to say move around the room, but move around the internet. William, you're first up.
Okay, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and can I thank the Minister for coming along. Excuse me. Will the Minister agree with me that farmers, first of all, need to be profitable to deliver on green growth, and they'll also need government support to deliver on green growth?
Yes, and to that end, we have been working on our request to the Executive for funding to support that change to take place. So I think it's currently sitting at around £600 million to be spent on those areas under DAERA's responsibility, which would support whether it be animal nutrients, waste arising from households and so forth, but the whole series of things within the ambit of this department would require considerable additional funding to make things happen. And I actually think good investment at an early stage will deliver good results quickly, and that's where we want to get to. So the sooner we can start investing in that environmental change, that will allow us to ensure that we have a cleaner environment and an environment which produces considerably less emissions, and in fact captures carbon in a better way. So those are all courses of work that we can kick off relatively quickly, should the funding come forward from the Department of Finance.
Thank you, Minister, and I appreciate that is the case. But as you would agree, it's very important that farmers actually know where the target, where they have to get to, and are kept fully up to date and understand where they actually have to get to in real terms.
Well, of course, we have been investing already, for example, in lessee equipment, which will reduce methane and ammonia both. And we have a series of other things that we can do to continue to reduce methane and ammonia. Ammonia isn't one of the carbon emitters, but it does impact upon peatlands, and therefore a reduction in ammonia helps reduce carbon as well, because it ensures that there's less leakage of carbon from the peatlands, and I would hope that we will get them to the point where they will continue to capture carbon year on year. Although I should say peatlands will not resolve the carbon issue, because at best it could account for maybe 5%, but more likely to be 2 to 3% of carbon emissions. Some of the biggest things that we can do in terms of carbon are indeed in households, because 16% of emissions are in households, and therefore there's considerable piece of work to be done there with the community. But for us, our department, the key one is agriculture, which is 27%, and that's a course of work which I think we can start and make a dent on quite quickly. So, as I understand it, carbon emissions on agriculture has come down from the 1990s, but it has grown percentage-wise because it hasn't come down as quickly as other areas, such as energy.
Okay.
Thank you. Thanks, William. Harry?
Okay, and thank you very much, Deputy Chair. And first of all, condolences to Chair Dacton on his recent loss. And Minister, we do thank you for your attendance here this morning. First of all, a wee comment on Finn's Law and servants for service animals. I must say I'm content to accept accelerated passage for this bill as non-contentious, and there are no reasons not to. Animal cruelty and suffering is something that this committee has no time for, and if this bill helps stop in any way intentional injury or suffering, then it's good. Okay, and we'll just move on to a couple of questions for you, Minister. Minister, how do you foresee green growth helping to deliver much needed energy supply security going forward?
Okay, first of all, thank you for your comments on Finn's Law, Mr. Harvey, and just would pass comment. Animal cruelty is a big issue, and there are still elements of our society who engage in it, sadly. And ultimately, I think that whatever legislation that this Assembly can continue to pass, which will strengthen justice in delivering on that, it's important that we do that. I'd be very keen to see the animal cruelty register established. I think that would be a real good step forward for the Assembly. So with dog wardens and all of those people would be facilitated with further weapons in their fight against animal cruelty. So there's more work to be done there, and I would encourage progress on all of these fronts. In terms of the green growth strategy and energy security, everybody can see the problem where we are with energy at the minute. At this moment in time, gas prices are rocketing, and a relatively small number of countries have the ability to restrict the amount of fossil fuels, both oil and gas, coming to the market, and the consequence of that is that those prices can rise rapidly at any point. And that has happened this year, and that will have a consequence for every home across the country, where people are going to have to pay more to heat their homes this winter, and that will be very difficult for them. It'll have a cost for industry and for business, and consequently that'll be passed on in our food prices and everything else. So there's a severe impact to be had for energy prices rising so quickly. So what can we do about it? Well, in Northern Ireland, we're currently sitting at 45% renewable energy. And I suppose for years we saw it as a disadvantage that we didn't have, fossil fuels, coal, oil and gas, so that others who benefited greatly from selling those products onto the world market, we never had those benefits in the past. But it's now turning to our advantage that we don't have those fossil fuels, because we are now sitting on 45% renewable electricity. We need to make that broader across the renewable energy sector as opposed to just renewable electricity, and we need to expand the amount of renewable electricity that we have. So we reckon we can get to 70% renewable electricity onshore, and the rest will be derived offshore. There's a number of planning applications which are currently in the making for offshore electricity, and that's something which we will have to monitor very carefully to ensure we get the right balance between the environment and renewable energy sector. Onshore, I suppose the three key areas are going to be further wind energy, solar energy, and indeed anaerobic digestion. In order to do that, that will require obviously the erection of more wind turbines, more solar panels, which I would love to see more businesses and farms actually installing the solar panels. They pay for themselves relatively quickly, probably 5 or 6 years, without rocks or without assistance. I would add to that, one of the biggest problems that we have is the single provider of connections to the grid. And the single provider isn't responding quickly enough in terms of getting people connected quickly. And I believe the costs that they are charging people is exorbitant. And I would call on the electricity regulator to open that market up, and open that market up quickly, because it is holding back the renewable energy green growth revolution that can take place, because the single provider system, in my opinion, clearly doesn't work. The other aspect of it is that we can produce a lot of hydrogen in Northern Ireland, and hydrogen uses an awful lot of electricity to produce, but a lot of the electricity that we are currently not utilising could be generated at night. So a lot of those wind turbines are not being used as much as they could be, because they have to be switched off at night, and there isn't the same power being used at night. So we need to use that power that can be generated 24 hours a day, but currently isn't, from renewable sources, to produce another form of energy, which is hydrogen. And that is something which can be done on a very consistent basis. The ability of us to actually increase the solar panels extensively whenever electric is being used more heavily during the day would be a significant advantage to us. So the production of hydrogen, I believe, is key to drive our buses, to drive our lorries, to drive our agricultural machinery, all that heavy equipment, and I believe has the potential to move forward into cars as well, and be a much more sustainable form of renewable energy for transport than electric, which involves mining materials, mainly in Africa, but in other places, and there's end-of-life issues. So that is one aspect of it. The other aspect of it, which I believe is key and fundamental to this, is more anaerobic digestion of animal nutrients. Anaerobic digestion can deliver us biomethane. That biomethane is a dirtier gas and is currently the natural gas, and would involve a further clean before it could be put into the pipe system. But that is an area where I would like to see investment happen, so that the gas that is produced from the methane from cattle, as opposed to ending up in our atmosphere and putting carbon into the atmosphere, ends up going into people's boilers, and consequently you're winning both ways, because you're reducing the methane that's going from cattle into the air, you're burning that methane off, and it's an environmentally friendly way of producing heat in people's homes. Currently there's enough anaerobic digestion in Northern Ireland to provide biomethane for around 62% of homes. The gas people would tell us, the firms, Phoenix Natural Gas and companies, tell us that the pipelines that they have, with very moderate modification, would be capable of taking this gas, which can't happen in Great Britain, for example, for it's mainly a metal network, and it wouldn't work there. So we can be on the cusp of doing something really leading in Northern Ireland, in that we produce that, take that methane, which is going into the atmosphere, put it into the gas network, burn it off, and we're getting a double win. So in my opinion, we need to have more anaerobic digestion, and we have a really good win from that, in conjunction with hydrogen. And we can have the oil lorries, which are currently lifting oil, fossil fuel, running oil, delivering that to people's homes all around the country. Those vehicles can be running on hydrogen, collecting that mixture of biomethane and hydrogen, and delivered to homes in the country, and it is all entirely carbon neutral. So we can use the problem that we have in agri-food in terms of methane production and turn that into a solution for homes right across Northern Ireland. And that is the vision that we need to encapsulate, but we need to turn that vision into reality. The second aspect of that particular area is that after anaerobic digestion, I would be of the view that we go a step further and we engage in slurry separation. And that involves taking the dry materials and using that which is phosphate rich to turn into pellets of fertiliser, which will be an organic fertiliser and can be utilised in Northern Ireland, but the surplus is sold elsewhere. So as opposed to farmers who are very busy at the minute out spreading slurry in fields, spreading slurry, they will get the phosphates and spread the appropriate amount of phosphates, which we will have carried out the soil analysis for, enabling the right amount of phosphate go into our fields, and consequently we don't have the runoff into the rivers, giving us cleaner rivers. The watery material, we can compress the nitrogen and then apply that by spraying, for example. And again, all of this can be linked through GPS systems, so that when you go into a field, you may be spraying a heavier quantity in one part of the field than the other, because that field, you get the optimum amount of fertiliser added to the ground at that point. You don't get too much, you don't get too little, you get the optimum amount which the crop can utilise and benefit from, but it is of no detriment to the environment. And that is, of course, the work that needs to be done. The remainder of the dirty water can be stored and applied, particularly during dry periods, with no impact upon the environment. So that's where we need to get to, Mr. Harvey, in terms of finding solutions. Ridding ourselves of the problem of methane, or certainly a significant reduction of the problem of methane being produced from our animals, and capturing that methane then and turning it into a source of energy for homes.
Harry, before you come in again, I think this is an opportune moment, Minister, in terms of your vision about moving away from fossil fuel towards renewable energy, which I think everybody would applaud. But I mean, people will be wondering, in relation to leaving aside the very real environmental impacts of the decision taken yesterday to issue the marine licence at Larnloch. I mean, it seems to be a complete contradiction in terms of what you've just outlined.
No, absolutely not. Because if we go down the route of renewable energy, we are going to need facilities to store hydrogen, for example. So whenever we generate that at night, we're going to need a facility to store that before it goes out. On that particular decision, I followed the recommendation that came from all of the experts within our department and all of the sources of expertise that they sought in making a recommendation to me. So I did not alter in any way, shape or form the recommendation that came before me on that decision. It was a decision taken on the basis of the environmental information provided to the experts that we have working for us.
Okay, Harry, do you want to come in again?
Yeah, just briefly, Chair. First of all, thank you, Minister, for a very detailed answer, much appreciated. I'm just wondering, Minister, what engagement have you or your officials had with other departments in designing this green growth strategy? If you could just tell me that, please. Thank you.
Yes, well, we'll have the interministerial group, which is obviously supported by our civil service, and we also have a strategic group within the civil service of senior civil servants who are supporting this and providing their quality of information for it. And that has enabled us to develop the strategy to this point, where it's now with the executive, and it's our plan to launch it just before COP26 in conjunction with the energy strategy, which will be a demonstration that Northern Ireland is for real when it comes to climate change, that we are going to take those practical steps that are necessary to take this forward. And I want to see us getting to the point where Northern Ireland is 100% renewable energy and actually an exporter of renewable energy, both electricity and indeed renewable energy. And I think that that can be done in a way which continues to support our local economy. And it also takes us away from these massive fluctuations in oil and gas prices, where, you know, the prices just get out of hand on some occasions. I remember oil, the last recession, in my opinion, was kicked off whenever oil hit about $145 per barrel. It just gets exorbitantly expensive, and the consequence of that is that it drives the cost of everything up. And you know, the last time that happened, the price of grain had got very high at the same time, and we now are seeing exactly the same thing. Grain prices are high, gas and oil prices are high. What's the consequence? You know, people who are living in homes, the food on their table is rising in price quickly. Energy prices are rising quickly, and it's a perfect storm, which causes hardship for people.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Harry. John Blair.
Thank you, Chair. Can I, before I start, also record my sincere sympathy to our Chairman and his family and Vice Chair, and also thank the Minister for the detailed information before us and the team that he has with him as well. Couple of things I want to raise in relation to green growth, but before that I want to formally thank the Minister for bringing forward the Finns Law proposals, and much needed in this jurisdiction. I had an opportunity myself, Chair, to visit a police dog the week before last, a police dog that was unfortunately injured during the civil unrest earlier this year, but glad to report that Daphne, the police dog that I met at the Steeple in Antrim, fully recovered and appeared indeed on the Crime NI programme just a couple of nights ago. In relation, Chair, to the green growth strategy, a couple of things. First of all, I noticed in the written presentation we're given, and I can bring some of this up with officials later today if necessary, matters like the green growth test previously listed separately and specifically on the list of actions, as well as the need for a net zero fleet and estate by 2035, seem to have been absorbed into other areas. Now, I have no problem because they're clearly still there, but I'm wondering what they think it is behind that sort of streamlining of those actions. And then secondly, if we can do both together, there was formerly a greenhouse gas implementation partnership chaired by the Department for the Sector, operated, as far as I understand it, between 2016 and 2020, reported, I believe, in 2020. But doesn't seem to be featuring as a strategy in any of the documents before us. And I'm wondering, will such partnerships still have a place, or will they be replaced by some of the actions in the green growth strategy?
Okay. I'm conscious that I've done a lot of the talking, and Tracy is with me, who has done so much of the work in green growth. So perhaps, Tracy, you would deal with those issues for us.
John, on the last point there about the partnership, we're going to re-engage with the Greenhouse Gas Implementation Partnership, because there has been a gap in the period of engagement. So we've just got the wheels in motion to do that, and certainly that's something we plan to do, and it will be in the context of green growth that we will do that going forward. I think your first question was around the green growth test. Yeah. And the reason that we've put this green growth test forward, and picks up a wee bit in Harry's point about all of the departments aligning, the green growth, we've made a conscious decision when we've been around that table as senior officials that one of the key ways to make a change here is to make sure that policy decisions and budget decisions going forward are actually assessed against not just the pure monetary value for money, but they're assessed against their implications for climate change, for the environment and for the economy. So we have streamlined that in a recommendation that all policy and budgetary decisions should go through a green growth test. That's a very firm commitment that we want to take forward. And I missed your second question, so apologies, John, could you repeat it?
Was the separate commitment to a net zero fleet and estate, Tracy, by, I think the date of 2035 in the original green growth strategy document, and it seems to have been taken off as a separate target and absorbed to some degree in others. I'm just wondering what the thinking around that is, and will that be applied across the departments as well?
Yeah, I think that's purely, we got feedback, John, that our 20 commitments were too much, and we slimmed them down to 10. But certainly our ambition is, and we're again engaged really closely with DOF on things like procurement policies, and that will come into fleet. I mean, we do genuinely, our vision for this is that we would see, you know, should it be a Rivers Agency fan or a CAFRE vehicle, you know, we would want them all to be, you know, net zero electric vehicles, whatever they will be running hydrogen, as the Minister said. That's certainly our ambition, and we'll be discussing that with DOF as part of that message going forward.
I think health and justice would be two of the big ones in this one, John. So obviously all your police vehicles with justice. Health is a huge estate with it, and also have the fire service and the ambulance service. So, you know, it has significant implications, and we are conscious of those other departments and pulling this forward. But clearly, we need to be moving to that area and quickly.
Okay, thank you, Minister. Thanks, Tracy, for that.
Okay, thank you, John. Patsy?
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair, and Minister, good to see you again. Just, if I could ask, if you could maybe for us, and probably for a lot of the listeners, if you could maybe put a bit more meat on the bones of what you would see as being just transition, and what that would actually mean for people, or how it would take shape, and maybe if you could explain a bit further what's the role of this Just Transition Commission? What's it supposed to do? What's its function? Or maybe that hasn't been fully completed yet as to what that role might be. And then, as a bit of an add-on, what learning has the department, or is the department taking from the Scottish experience around the Just Transition measures that they've put in place? I know we're not certainly not like for like in terms of the economy and the heavy emphasis that there is in the north here on agri-food sectors and the number of people employed in it. But I would be interested just to hear what the department thinking has been around all those aspects of the concept of just transition.
Well, what does just transition mean? And for me, what it means is, first element of it is transition. So we need to transition from a society which emits a lot of carbon to a society which is zero carbon, and we need to get to that in as reasonable time frame as possible, and that's where the just element comes in. And I suppose you know, we should be cautious not to compare ourselves with everywhere else and what we go about to achieve it, because we have our own intricacies and we have our own differences. And I suppose the fact that we produce enough animal proteins for 10 million people is an area where that puts greater pressure on us, because currently, as those animals are produced, there is substantial carbon leakage. But can we address that? Yes, we can, and I have indicated means of addressing it. That won't address it all on its own. I should say that as we move more to my idea of organic fertilizers, which are home produced, because currently I think we're importing something like 320,000 tonnes of mineral fertiliser per year. That in itself will actually considerably reduce the amount of carbon that we're emitting. So if we go down that route that I'm suggesting, you will get the just element of it. Because instead of us saying, you know, see that farming business and just forget about that, we'll just wipe out, you know, over 80% of it, and the consequence of that will have in our, dairy processing sector and in the meat processing sector and all of that there, and the 113,000 jobs that are associated with agri-food. We can do that. I don't think it would be acceptable if this committee proposed something which said we're going to wipe out 70 or 80,000 jobs in the city of Belfast. So, you know, that to me isn't a just transition. So playing words with just transition, you know, sticking the word just transition into something and then doing the absolute reverse doesn't stack up for me. A just transition is actually identifying we've got a problem, we've identified what the problem is, we know where we need to get to, and the transition is how we get from that A to B, and do that in as fair a way as possible. And anybody knows me over the years in politics, I've always sought to find fair solutions for the public in Northern Ireland, and that will continue to be how I operate.
Just on that, and a lot of what and I hear what you're saying there, Minister, about how farming practices can be changed, how things can be done, and I'm listening to you about the fertiliser. But in order to do that, that will require support. It'll require support by way of, without a shadow of doubt, government intervention. So I was wondering what thinking had been done at departmental level about what types of support or interventions, financial or otherwise, will be provided as part of that transition to ensure that it is in fact just, and that people don't take a hit or are disadvantaged as a result of it.
Well, we have a paper that's pretty close to be ready to go to the Department of Finance, dealing with this, and you know, in that we will look at a whole series of measures which will ensure that we can actually start and take on these issues of creating a better environment, and an environment is emitting considerably less carbon, and an environment which is better placed to capture carbon than is currently the case, and that will involve hundreds of millions of pounds of investment from the public sector, and indeed hundreds of millions of pounds of investment from the private sector. However, in asking the private sector to step up to the plate and do this, it'll create a sustainable sector, both environmentally and financially, and one where we can go to the world and say, not only are we producing the best food in the world, we're producing it in a way which meets the highest environmental standards anywhere in the world. And that's where I want us to be. So that we, whenever people are concerned about a deal done with South America, which will probably happen at some stage, or other places in terms of their food production, where we're not competing on the same level because we're producing the best. So we get the best prices. And that's where I want us to be. It's sustainable environmentally, and it's sustainable from a business point of view, and that's where we want to take the industry.
Okay, thanks very much indeed for that, Edwin. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Patrick. Rosemary?
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Minister. Minister, just like to offer my support also to the accelerated passage in relation to Finn's Law. This intentional injuring of animals is totally unacceptable, and I support you totally in what you're doing there. I just want to move on, Minister, to what you just talked about, the grid, and you wanted 100% renewable energy. In the West, we have, for want of another word, the most wind in Northern Ireland in relation to coming across from the Atlantic, and obviously we have a number of wind energy farms, etc. But the problem has been for years and years this connection to the grid, and when individuals go looking for connection to the grid, it seems to be just add another naught onto the figures onto a number. So it's become very, very expensive and actually impossible. And that's the first thing. And the second thing is, I understand the grid is not up to taking this excess energy that needs to be put back into the grid. So I'm wondering what plans you have for upgrading the grid, along with your colleague, Minister Mallon.
In terms of that, the responsibility for a lot of this will lie with the regulator. And that's why I stated at the start of the meeting that the regulator, I believe, needs to introduce further companies to actually carry out the work on the grid. because I don't believe a single company having responsibility for this is good for Northern Ireland. It's good for renewable energy, it's good for the environment, or indeed is good for business, because the costs and the timescales for doing this are exorbitant, and the delays are far too long. So we need a better response, and I welcome your commentary and your support on that particular issue, Ms. Martin. I also think, and you did quite rightly point out, that the renewable energy production in the west of the province is very significant. And for me, I think that creates a massive opportunity for the west of the province, because having consistent renewable energy available is something which is really good for business. And I can think of businesses such as the large data businesses, a very modern business, but they are hugely reliant on energy. And instead of setting those businesses up in Greater Belfast, for example, why can't a number of businesses be established which can create thousands of jobs in the west of the province, and use the electricity that's produced in the west of the province? I think that would be a really, really good news story to send out there. I know that actually, the south of Ireland have been pushing very heavily to get those data companies. They've got to the point where they don't have the energy to support them, and that should be somewhere where we should be seeking to advantage ourselves in creating a strong economy in the west of the province, using that renewable energy. So, people look sometimes at the whole thing around carbon reduction and environment and just see problems. I look at it and see advantages, and we need to be well placed to take those advantages. And certainly everything that I will do as a minister will be to identify how we can do the right thing on the environment, but also do the right thing for the economy, because the economy is critical to people, because it's the economy that puts food on people's tables.
Yeah. Minister, thank you for that answer. And the second thing, it's in relation to, we spoke about our wind energy farms, these planning regulations. Is there any thoughts in how would we say, perhaps re-looking at them again with regard to the growth of wind energy?
Well, Planning Policy Statement 18 was something that I produced last when I was the Environment Minister, and that actually opened the door to a lot of the renewable energy that currently exists. And I know some people don't really like the wind turbines, and they do happen to be placed, very often in areas of scenic beauty, and Mr. McGuigan will have a lot of them in his constituency, as do you in yours. And but for me personally, I think they're a sign of progressiveness and progression, and we need to accept that there's some pain involved in that progression. But whenever those wind turbines are turning, they are doing, aside from the installation, the concrete, whatever is used in the installation, which is relatively modest, they are doing no damage to the environment whatsoever, and they're producing electricity to keep the lights on in our homes, to give us the power in our businesses, and therefore, we need to continue to do that. And I know people at the start who lived close to proposed AD plants, got very excited about them. In terms of smell and everything else, they are relatively neutral, and again, it has taken a lot of the nasties out of the food production side, from the animal nutrients, and actually doing something positive with it. So, all of these positive steps, we need to embrace and we need to make happen. And, planning, the planning policies now lie with the Department for Infrastructure. It's not for me to dictate to the Department for Infrastructure what they do, but in terms of what I was suggesting about going after data centres and so forth, and having the energy there available for them, that needs to be pressed ahead with. We need to snap up the opportunities to actually, you've lost so many of your young people over the years from County Fermanagh. Some of them have taken the tragic step of moving down to Greater Belfast, but worse than that, some of them went even further. But wouldn't it be great to have jobs available for people to return to County Fermanagh, to County Tyrone, and places like that there, where they have good jobs on their doorstep and are able to live in the beautiful environment that exists in those areas.
Okay, thank you very much, Minister.
Thank you, Minister. I know you've still some time spare, so Claire is on, but her internet's very poor, so she's asked me to ask a couple of questions on her behalf. So, if it is, Minister, your intention to expand anaerobic digestion, what will happen with the excess nutrients? And has the department done an assessment of potential further problems for water, soil, air and health as a result?
Yeah, well, I thought I explained that whenever I responded to Harry, but certainly I want to go beyond anaerobic digestion and then have the separation, take the phosphates out, soil analysis, doing the LIDAR, knowing what the ground actually needs in terms of absorption, and therefore our water quality will rise as a result of that. There is less, because it's organic fertiliser that you're spreading, there are less issues with the air quality, considerably less issues than there would be with spreading quite ammonia intensive mineral fertilisers.
Okay, and then, this isn't Claire's question, but if the Minister is confident that, of using the biomethane from cattle can be used, then why not support a net zero target for the North?
Because all of the qualitative scientific advice that we have hasn't indicated that we can get there. Now, I'm hopeful that we can get more than 82% by 2050, and that's why I want to actually embrace the challenge of it and get on with it. I'm also of the view that there is potential science out there which will help us achieve more. But I think that we can't go in on the premise of making assumptions that we'll be able to do that, and then it isn't a target, it's an aspiration. And I think it's very, very clear that we need to focus on what is actually deliverable and build upon that and build towards 100%, because I like yourself and Claire and everybody else in this committee wants to get to the 100% as quickly as possible. But in life, I would tend to err on the side of caution in this respect, that you under-promise and over-deliver, as opposed to over-promise and under-delivering. And, I look at particularly what has been promised in Republic of Ireland, but that's not matched with how they're actually going to do it. And, their roadmap doesn't demonstrate how they're going to achieve 100%. So I think to say we can get to 100% and there isn't going to be a problem is a bit of a bluff. And I don't want to be engaged in that kind of bluff.
But, I suppose the question is, the science, because you often talk about following the science, but the science is very clear in the potential harms of not reaching net zero. And I'm not just talking about the North, I'm talking obviously across the globe. And, the impacts that will have, not just within our agricultural economy, but right across society. You're very confident in detailing some science today that you think will help go a long way to help, particularly with the methane problem. You're quite right. We're sitting 20 years away from, or more than 20 years away from a 2045, so there will be developing targets. This is the time, I suppose, in my view, to offer certainty right across all sectors that this is the target that we're moving towards, and here's how we're going. You have, Minister, if I can say, within the space of a few months moved thankfully, dramatically along supporting just transition and supporting All-Ireland work in relation to climate change. I think most people would just assume that the next logical step in moving from 2 bills to 1 bill and getting climate change legislation in the North is to set an ambitious net zero target.
Well, you see, we're told by experts that this is an ambitious target, and it does achieve net zero for the UK, and unless we actually reduce consumption, then that production is going to take place elsewhere. So what I won't do, Mr. Chair, is accept a circumstance where we export our carbon problem and import our food, because that will lead to significant job loss. It will lead to no improvement for the environment, because the carbon is being produced elsewhere, and we have engaged in something which is self-inflicting damage to our own people, and I have to resist that. I should say that there's, as a society, we produce an awful lot of carbon from a society which is heavily engaged in consumption per se, not just consumption of food, but so many other things. And I look at a circumstance where we import so much from countries whose carbon footprint has increased massively, and nobody has a word to say about that. So, I think it is wrong to inflict the hair shirt on the rural community by people who are engaged in heavy consumption of goods which is coming from countries which are continuing to build coal-fired power stations at an alarming rate. Yeah. And one of the countries has 31% of the carbon emissions, but people have absolutely no issues about importing stuff hand over fist from that country, and then saying Northern Ireland, who produce 0.04% of the emissions, we need to destroy our economy to do that. That doesn't make sense to me. We need to take on our responsibilities, but we also have a responsibility to our own community to ensure that we have those jobs, to ensure that our young people don't have to go to Australia. We actually haven't moved down this road particularly quickly, or America or other places, to get a living. I want the young people, the generation that's coming forward in Northern Ireland, to have an opportunity of getting a job in Northern Ireland, and in Northern Ireland where our waterways are cleaner, our air is cleaner, and our carbon emissions have reduced dramatically.
Okay. Obviously COP26 is coming up, and the issues that we're talking about, I suspect potentially could be addressed there, but we've had this discussion, we're not going to meet minds on it today. Claire had also wanted me to ask, in relation to the ammonia strategy that we've been hearing about for a long time, can you give us any kind of confirmation today when we're likely to see this?
Yes, well, we'll have met the Attorney General, we've sought advice of her. We have had further scientific advice, and we're dealing with that in the final elements of the report.
So soon?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're working towards getting that out soon.
Okay, thank you. And Harry has just one last question for you, Minister, before we go. Harry. Harry, you're possibly in mute.
Sorry, yes, thank you, Chair. Appreciate that. Thank you, and thank you very much, Minister. Minister, green growth and meeting climate change objectives will in many respects be capital intensive. Have you considered bids for capital funding to deliver this green growth? Thank you.
Yeah, we're currently, I think, sitting at 600 million, but it could go up over the course of the next 5 years, and that's the sort of bid that we're looking to actually take head on the challenges that are facing our environment, and that's just the reality. We can talk the talk, about having a better environment, but we now need to walk the walk, and that involves investment. Can I, Chair, just also express my sympathies to the Chairman? I wasn't aware that he'd had a bereavement in the family, and pass on my sympathies as well.
Will do. Thank you very much, Minister. And that's the roundup of questions, Minister. So once again, just thank you for coming to brief us this morning. Thank your team of Tracy, Kevin and Aaron. Thank you all very much. Okay, members, just before we move on, I think on the last question of Harry's there in relation to what the Minister has said about the 600 million bid, I would suggest that the committee writes to the department just about the plans for that bid, if people are happy enough to get more detail. Yep, everybody's nodding in agreement, so we can do that, thank you. So we're moving on then to item number 6 on the agenda, which is a written briefing from the Department on the statutory instrument, the Waste and Agricultural Legislative Functions Regulations 2021. So I refer members to the briefing paper from the Department, page 111 of the pack. This outlines the DEFRA will be laying the SA on the 18th of November 2021, which will allow public authorities to exercise a number of waste directives previously carried out by the European Commission. So under the SA, DERA will have the authority to carry out a number of technical powers, including making regulations in respect of sampling landfill waste, make provisions in respect of the mining waste directive, prescribe criteria on byproduct conditions for specific substances, and specify technologies for the storage and treatment of waste electricals. So can I ask members if they have any questions on this, please forward them, and any further questions or comments to the clerk by close of play today. Everybody content with that? Okay, and we'll just move on then to item number 7 on the agenda, which is the oral briefing from the Department on Climate Bill number 2. So, can I refer members to the Department's written briefing on the Climate Change number 2 bill at page 116, and a supplementary memo by the clerk can also be found at page 120 of your packs. So, can I just welcome them by Starleaf, Colin Breen, Director of Environmental Policy Division, Arlene McGowan, Environmental Policy Division, and Anthony Courtney, also Environmental Policy Division. So can I ask the officials just to brief the committee?
Yep, thank you, Chair. Just check everybody can hear me.
Yep.
Thank you. So, good morning. I suppose first thing I would just like to do is pass on my condolences to Declan and his family at this time as well. So thanks to the committee for the opportunity to brief you on the Climate Change number 2 bill. I don't intend to cover the content of the bill in great detail in the opening remarks. The key aspects and provisions in the bill remain unchanged from the previous briefings, including the detailed policy briefing in March. They've been summarised in the written briefing provided, and the clerk has also provided an overview and summary of the bill in advance of the launch of the committee's call for evidence. But in short, the bill is a tight and focused piece of legislation containing the key elements necessary to address climate change. It sets a target of an at least 82% net reduction in greenhouse gases by 2050, with interim targets in 2030 and 2040, provides powers to set carbon budgets, contains a number of reporting requirements in relation to the targets, adaptation programmes and carbon budgets, including a requirement to set out the proposals and policies for meeting each carbon budget. It places a number of requirements on the UK Climate Change Committee in relation to the provision of independent scrutiny, and provides a power to bring forward future legislation in relation to climate change reporting by public bodies. And finally, and very importantly, it places duties on all Northern Ireland departments to take action to meet the targets and carbon budgets set under the bill. So firstly, to the headline target. I know critics will cite the Paris Agreement and the most recent IPCC report as evidence of a need for NI net zero above all else. But I just want to highlight that within the Paris Agreement, food security is an explicit theme. Article 2.1 of the agreement cites the importance of protecting food production while reducing emissions. So the current evidence for Northern Ireland suggests that shrinking our agri-food sector would simply move production elsewhere, effectively offshoring carbon emissions. So while developing this legislation, I had to take that evidence into account. Also, the most recent IPCC report reaffirms and makes it clear that we should keep temperature rises as small as possible to limit global warming. But it very much framed as a global challenge, but tackling it in a way that considers local circumstances. So pushing our emissions to another part of the world, in my objective opinion, isn't really the best way to follow what the evidence is saying. I think it would be highly damaging to our economy to pursue an NI net zero target for no global benefit to reducing emissions. The costs of pursuing this unevidenced target have been estimated at tens of billions more than a Northern Ireland equitable UK net zero contribution, and this money is unlikely to be provided by a UK net zero fund, as it is beyond what is recommended to us for net zero. And again, as an official, I have to advise and protect the public purse. Importantly, and I think this is an important point, the CCC have confirmed that the IPCC report is entirely consistent with the scientific basis for UK net zero target and for their independent advice to Northern Ireland. So now I'm going to very briefly address some of the points that I've seen members raise in previous correspondence, briefings and debates. So the first one was around the power to amend targets. During the bill's second stage, a number of members raised concerns and called these sweeping powers, the ones that are in clause 4 of the bill. But I want to be clear that these concerns are unfounded. This is a common provision across climate change legislation to allow flexibility, and I note this was mentioned in the raised briefing. However, it is important to emphasise that there are a number of robust preconditions attached to even using these powers, and these are set out in clause 31 of the bill. The targets can only be changed as a result of significant developments in UK or international law, in development in scientific knowledge or technology relevant to climate change, or if advice from the Climate Change Committee indicates that it is appropriate to change the targets. It is highly unlikely that such developments or advice would indicate that a less stringent target would be appropriate. And in terms of the power, it is standard in Northern Ireland legislation that the power is provided to an individual department. However, use of the power is subject to Executive and Assembly approval. Therefore, a Minister could not change the targets without the support of the Executive and the Assembly, and without robust evidence to support it. Similar powers in climate change legislation in other parts of the UK have been used to introduce more ambitious targets, and the intention would be that the power would similarly be used to increase target levels when the advice shows it is appropriate to do so, and indeed our Minister has confirmed this during the bill's second stage debate. I know some members of the committee have also questioned why there are no transboundary provisions in the bill, and I would emphasise that climate change is a global challenge which knows no boundaries. However, Northern Ireland, as part of the UK, has to contribute to UK efforts to reach net zero emissions as required under the UK Climate Change Act. But that certainly does not prohibit us from working further with the Republic of Ireland on common policies and approaches, as we already do. And there's nothing in the executive bill that prohibits us from working on climate change with our counterparts in the south, as well as the UK, and indeed well beyond these islands. It's important to highlight that there are no transboundary provisions in climate change legislation in the rest of the UK or in the Irish Act. And the transboundary provisions in the Climate Change No. 1 bill are limited to taking into account the transboundary element of carbon and nitrogen flows when setting carbon budgets and nitrogen budgets. So, as an official, it would be beneficial to understand what benefit this would have in tackling climate change. But certainly if we could understand this aim, we could look at a compromise amendment, and I noticed the Minister did cover his openness to sensible amendments this morning. So it is, I suppose the next issue that is important, and it is very clear this morning that it's very important, is around delivering a just transition. So although the bill currently doesn't specifically refer to the term just transition, the targets in the bill are based on the CCC's balanced pathway, which aims to reach UK net zero while delivering a just transition. So I believe it is much more important to have a balanced pathway than to simply list high-level just transition principles in the bill itself, which does not ensure any just transition and which can be difficult to interpret and measure in terms of their intent, meaning and effect. For example, principles in the Climate Change No. 1 bill refer to supporting jobs and the growth of jobs that are climate resilient and environmentally and socially sustainable, and to create work which is high value, fair and sustainable. But during our deliberations, we have to actually ask, what does that mean and how would we measure it or prove it has been met? These are the sort of questions we always consider when drafting and scrutinising legislative provisions. But I think it's important that that's not me saying that it cannot be addressed or worked through other appropriate mechanisms. You've just heard from the Minister that the Green Growth Strategy has a just transition at the heart of this executive strategy, and one of the aims is to establish a Just Transition Commission. So our thinking in developing the bill was that this did not need to be delivered through primary or other legislation, just as been the case in Scotland with their Just Transition Commission. But again, as the Minister said, we're not opposed to any reasonable legislative amendment, and we are certainly open to looking at this in any sort of compromise. So, as you're aware, the Minister said he has met with Claire and her team, and we as officials have met several times since for detailed negotiations. Ultimately, what I'm aiming to do is get the best outcome of a fully operable Climate Change Act delivered within this mandate. I did believe that we had the beginnings of a compromise, which would involve incorporating a number of elements of the Private Members Bill into the Executive Bill, with the intention being that the Private Members Bill is not moved to the next stage to maximise effective use of all our limited resources within the Department and the Committee, and indeed plenary time in the Assembly. So the Minister wrote to Claire on the 17th of September seeking her agreement, but as he has just said, he hasn't heard any response as yet. But the Minister has been very clear, and I think I as an official have to be quite clear that I am also not in favour of maximum science-led ambition, but the evidence does not support a target that is not based on sound evidence. And this is where certainly as officials we can't recommend a target that's going to cost Northern Ireland tens of billions of pounds. And we hope to be able to provide a draft copy of the impact assessments to the committee, so you can actually see some of that. And we're looking into that at the minute. It's not normally the case, but I think it may be important for the committee. And I think that's all from me for now, and I will invite your questions. Thank you for listening, and Arlene, Anthony and I are now ready.
Okay, Colin, thank you very much. Just in terms of your last point there about the CCC, you're saying that your targets are based entirely on the CC's advice. Can I ask maybe what other sources of advice and expertise did the department consult on when appraising the potential emission targets for the North?
Well, there isn't any other advisory body providing that level of evidence. So, we did look at what the other jurisdictions in the UK had done, and we looked at the Irish Act. But unfortunately, that doesn't amount to evidence. As I said, we've looked at the Paris Agreement, and we have looked at the IPCC report. And the Climate Change Committee have confirmed that their advice is consistent with the IPCC report. So essentially, the Climate Change Committee, as the statutory advisory body, look at evidence from a wide range of sources and then summarise that for us. So that's how the process works.
Right. Okay. Fair enough. The other thing. First of all, in terms of transboundary issues, you said you couldn't see, paraphrasing, what the issue would be. But if you were a farmer along the border and had land in the north and land in the south, as quite a few farmers do, and businesses actually along the border, there would be a very big issue if there was two very different types of legislation and targets. So there's obviously a specific issue for farms and businesses straddling the border, but there's also the potential issue for the agricultural sector right across the north. working to very, very different targets and legislation and specifications in a sector that is very much based on all-island integration. So, I mean, if you could answer that question, and also, I mean, in terms of looking at the potential financial damage to the agricultural sector, I mean, did you look at financial damage, and what assessments did you look at in terms of the actual financial damage and other damage to the industry by the impacts of climate and the change?
Okay, so in terms of the first question, I think you may have misunderstood. So I was talking about the transboundary provisions within the private members bill, and that I fully see the importance of working on the transboundary issues, and we do already do that. It was understanding what sort of provisions would appear in legislation that could bolster that. So in the private members bill number 1, the only provisions are to take into account the nitrogen and the transboundary elements of nitrogen budgets and carbon budgets. But what the question was sort of, what does that achieve? Not just what does transboundary working achieve. Obviously transboundary working achieves a lot, and we do an awful lot of it. It was around what the provisions do. So I'm talking about purely in legislative terms, not in terms of working widely across these islands and well beyond. I'm certainly not saying that I'm opposed to any of that. What we try to do with every provision in a piece of legislation is look at what would the intent of that be and what would the effect of that be. And with the transboundary provisions as drafted, we can't understand what the intent and effect would be. Certainly there's an intent to work more closely on a transboundary level, but that's something that goes on without legislation and is going. The Irish Act hasn't included, neither has the Scottish, English or Welsh Acts. So we were following closely all of those, but by no means are we opposed to transboundary working. And certainly if that would help with a compromise and we could get an amendment in which would really satisfy any concerns, we are completely open to that, because the thing I really want is one good, operable, affordable bill that we can bring forward in this mandate and start really tackling climate change. So that's in relation to the first question. So in terms of differing targets, so I don't see this as an issue, and I don't fully understand it. Different regions work of what their maximum target can be. The difference between the north of the island and the south of the island is that we have a pathway and we have explained what we're going to do. The Irish Act is also, it's an objective as opposed to a target. I believe it was mentioned by Dr. Munzer in his presentation to you. But I don't see that. I see everybody doing the maximum. And I think I've stated this before. With the similarities between the north and south, if the south can indeed get to net zero by 2050, I don't believe the north has any issue in getting to net zero. The evidence doesn't suggest that at present. And the outgoing Teagasc president had a speech, and he certainly questioned whether agriculture in the south could get anywhere close to the level of emissions reductions by 2030 that had been suggested. And the final question, I can't read my own writing here, Philip, sorry, can you repeat the final question?
The negative impacts to particularly agriculture, coming from the consequences of climate change.
Yeah, so the impacts between the 82% target and the net zero target aren't actually any different, because the only difference in the 82% and the net zero target is that the remaining 18% of Northern Ireland emissions form part of UK net zero to be reduced, and that equates to 0.73% roughly of UK emissions. So the difference there isn't going to impact Northern Ireland. It's the global collective effort on tackling climate change. If that isn't part of it, now, and I'm not saying this as an us and them or a whataboutery type thing, but that difference is on global terms 0.0073% of emissions. So without a collective global challenge, if everybody doing the maximum, and not simply moving emissions or shifting emissions elsewhere, I don't think we'll ever get to a proper stage. Yes, the impacts of climate change are worrying, but the difference between an at least 82% target and a net zero target for Northern Ireland aren't going to save Northern Ireland or indeed the world from climate change. It's about everybody playing their maximum part and everybody being brought along and buying into targets. Because I think you're getting a briefing from the Agri-food Sector, and I don't feel that they're bought into a net zero target, and they're a big part of the solution. So, I really want to see a compromise. As an official, my advice has to be to follow the evidence, and also this would be too costly of a target. Regardless of who my minister was, I would be giving the same advice, and I would be saying the same thing, that we can't stand over a net zero target for Northern Ireland at this time. But certainly, as part of a compromise, what we have suggested is really, ramp up the discussion around ambition in the target, around more regular reviews, getting more evidence, and pursuing net zero as soon as is practicable, but still being based in science and evidence. And that's where I see a real compromise for all of us, is marrying the targets. I don't think any of us want to go against science and evidence. I don't think any of us want to, the KPMG report was also fairly shocking in terms of figures. So I think you have to balance the overall impact of climate change with the impact on the economy. And going for UK net zero will have the same outcome as Northern Ireland playing more of a part in UK net zero by going for NI net zero and possibly having to shift their food production to some other part of GB or far beyond.
Yeah, Colin, and you probably misinterpreted my question. I wasn't so much asking about the difference in the 82% and net zero. It's more on that last point, and even what you said about the agriculture industry maybe not bought into this. And that's specifically my point. There's lots of assessments and details on what moving towards net zero or moving towards 82% means, but I'm asking you, for an assessment on what happens without that, or what happens to the potential of our agriculture industry and businesses from climate change and from the impact of climate change. Because the only way we're going to allow people to buy in is if they realise that this is a very, very real impact on increased flooding, which will have an impact on increased droughts, which will have an impact on the nature of our land and what it can be used from as a result of climate change. So I'm specifically asking about that assessment, the dangers that will pose to our agricultural sector and beyond.
Oh yeah. That's I think we're on the same page in this one, Philip. That there will, if we do not start acting very quickly, have a devastating impact on agriculture and indeed on all of our lives. But equally, pursuing an on-evidence target at this time appears it will have a devastating impact on Northern Ireland agriculture. The solution is, and the only solution that I can see, is that we bring everybody along with us. But the first stage in that is really sort of getting an agreement where everybody is happy to be brought along and get a target that everybody can buy into, and then ramp up ambition as people start to progress. Certainly all of the other jurisdictions, Ireland, England, Scotland and Wales, they all started with legislation, lower targets, and then as work began, they started to ramp up the targets when they seen things could be done. We are lagging behind GB, and I do think part of that is because we haven't got our own legislation, and continuing to argue over the target doesn't help us tackle climate change. But equally, doing nothing isn't an option. But I feel that what we are proposing in terms of the evidence-based target is the best outcome for Northern Ireland in terms of tackling climate change and protecting rural communities, and generally protecting the budget for Northern Ireland, because the figures are frightening on the basis of current evidence of what it would cost to go for those that extra bit, which doesn't actually seem to assist the overall UK net zero or the overall global challenge if we simply offshore our carbon and move food production somewhere else. And that's the assessment based on all of the evidence. I know there's a fundamental head versus heart here, and obviously the heart says net zero is the only way to go. But unfortunately, as an official, I'm not really allowed a heart. I have a head. I look at all of the figures and provide all the figures on the basis of evidence, and that's really all I can do. There aren't many personal feelings in here, but the one I would say is my big personal feeling is to try and get a compromise, and I've been working hard to try and get one, because it's the best way for us to deliver legislation in which is a very frighteningly short mandate is left.
Yeah, okay. Colin, I'm conscious that I don't want to be hogging the meeting, and we've a list of members who want to come in, so I'm just going to move on. John?
Thank you, Chair. Colin, could I thank you and your colleagues for the information we've been given today, and your explanation thus far has covered some of what I was going to ask, but if I may try to drill down just a bit further on the absence of specific targets, cross-sectoral targets in what's before us, and also what appears to be the movement of some of the targeted responsibilities to the green growth strategy sitting separate to the legislation. Can I ask you whether it's in just transition, cross-sectoral targets or interdepartmental responsibilities? If a department failed consistently to meet the requirements of the carbon budget, what to whom would they answer for their responsibilities? What actions could be taken? Basically, by whom would that be done? How would that be done? Particularly if it's not in the legislation to begin with.
Right. So I think our legislation is very new in what it sets. It sets a duty on all departments to produce policies and to work towards meeting the targets. This has never been done in Northern Ireland legislation. We had to discuss it with the Attorney General. So it is actually the only legislation that within Northern Ireland that it does put duties on all departments. And then, there aren't, within government, there aren't fines as such, but that duty placed on a department opens up a number of avenues, such as, I would imagine, judicial review, but more likely it's just departmental reputation. If a department hasn't undertaken or delivered on their duty to do this, that as set out in Climate Change No. 2 bill, then it will be made quite clear in the reporting that the department has not done this. So it will be abundantly clear to the Assembly, the Executive, this committee, and indeed any member of the public reading those reports, that the department hasn't discharged their duties, and that is that's one of the big compromise positions that I had spoken about, is that Climate Change Bill No. 1 doesn't actually place a duty on anyone to do anything in pursuit of the targets, and that concerns me as an official, that regardless of what happens, that needs to be in there. And we spent some time and had some wranglings with an awful lot of legal people to get that in because it was so novel. So, that is something that maybe the committee need an entirely separate briefing on just how that would work. But that's a very important thing. You raise an important point that, but we are certainly working on that. In terms of cross-sectoral targets, so really, other legislation doesn't set individual sectoral targets. That is usually done through action plans, strategies, etc. That's so that no one sector sort of has a, if you like, that's all we have to go for. It's about giving everybody the maximum ambition within a balanced pathway. The CCC are quite clear on that as well, and as are the people developing the green growth strategy. So we were aware that sectoral targets would be placed. Even I don't like continuing to sort of, if you like, compare the two bills, but the Climate Change Bill No. 1 doesn't set sectoral targets. It says for sectoral targets to be set through the climate action plans. So, again, we're not, we have different wording for climate action plans. If you like, I actually like the term climate action plan. All of the reporting that is in the Climate Change Bill No. 2 is essentially a climate action plan, although it focuses purely on climate change itself, as in carbon emissions reductions. and that's probably one of the big differences. But in terms of your concern about it not placing duties on departments, if that is your question, and I think it was,
Yeah.
you know, I can assure you that our bill actually does have a very novel provision to do that.
Okay, and I think you've covered, Colin, I'm grateful for it. The specifics of putting some of the targets responsibilities into green growth is, I suppose, avoiding naming in legislation where names or organisations might change. I understand that, but is it to be confirmed then that that's why some of this is going into green growth?
Yeah, well, I suppose I think the confirmation really is that sectoral targets aren't usually a feature of climate change legislation, and we don't feel it would give the best benefit. Again, you know, as I will say now, both bills are in the legislative process. I have no control over these anymore. That's for all of yourselves in Parliament buildings. So any amendment could come forward, but our thinking very much is, you know, to work towards a target together with everybody feeding into that target, rather than saying, right, you need to do this, you need to do that, because perhaps, you know, with all of the changes in technology, who knows what is going to happen that can end up with more being done by any one sector. So it gives us maximum flexibility, and that's really what we were looking for, is flexibility within the bill. The strategy and the climate action plans, whatever version of them come forward, will have much more to do with sector-specific targets or sector-specific ambition, or, you know, even more of a balanced pathway within a sector. Because you have to also remember that sectors cut across different departments in many cases as well.
Yeah, no, appreciate that, Colin. So thanks for that answer.
Thank you, John.
Thanks, John. Harry?
Okay, thank you very much, Chair. Can you hear me this time?
Yep.
Okay, appreciate it. Okay, thank you, Anthony, Arlene, Colin, much appreciated. Just thinking, first of all, you mentioned interim targets at 2030 and 2040. Could you maybe enlighten us a wee bit more of what them interim targets are? Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just ask Anthony to remind me what the 2% figures are.
Oh, you're on mute, Anthony.
Oh, sorry, we can't hear him.
No, you're on mute.
Arlene, do you have the two figures to hand?
You're on mute as well, Arlene. You asked them to be brought in.
Listen, pressure, Colin, don't.
Yeah,
Okay,
Harry, it's 40 something and 60 something, but I can't remember the exact figures off the top of my head.
that's fine.
I am actually embarrassed not to, because I've spent long enough looking at them, but hopefully Anthony and Arlene will let me know.
Harry, the clerk
No
here,
problem.
Nick has the figures, if he wants to just provide them.
Thank you, Chair. So I believe the interim target for 2030 is that the Northern Ireland greenhouse gas emissions account should be at least 48% lower than the baseline. And then for year 2040, it's at least 69% lower than the baseline.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much,
Colin,
Nick.
then moving on. Moving on then, the 0.0073, like, wow, I mean, that equates into 18% here. Would you say that the difference between 82% and 100% here for our agri-food industry or sector, that could be the difference of it surviving to being non-existent, literally?
Well, I believe so. Oh, sorry,
Go ahead.
lots of delay. I believe the 0.0073 is the global emissions difference, and 0.73 would be the UK emissions difference. So that 0.73, you know, the UK advisory body are basically advising that net zero will be achieved for the UK without Northern Ireland reducing by that extra 0.73%. So the evidence would certainly suggest, and the KPMG report sort of strengthened that that extra, us pushing that extra for no global benefit would decimate the agriculture sector. I have 80-something% reduction in cows, I believe. Obviously, the agri-food sector will be able to give you better figures. Overall, I'm looking at it more in terms of the extra costs of doing so to the Northern Ireland economy. And as I said from our impact assessments, that's in the tens of billions of pounds over the life of our legislation. Now, that is not small change. And the HMT principles, which was first brought up in one of the RAISE briefings, would suggest that none of that money will come from Treasury, because that's Northern Ireland or one of the devolved administrations going beyond what is recommended or advised on a UK level.
Yeah, because I mean, I would feel that obviously at 82%, we can still produce high quality food. I mean, we do feed the UK and feed lots of others, but the worry would be if that's not happening, then it has to be offset, and then you've carbon leakage and all. So it would seem to make a little more sense. Yep. So thank you, and thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Patsy?
Yeah. Thanks very much, Chair. And thank you, Colin, for your time again. You mentioned, you used the phrase balanced pathway earlier there. Can you how would you see that balanced pathway? You've obviously given a lot of thought to this. It's just very clear from your presentation, the aspects of it that you have there. How would you see that balanced pathway taking shape? I mean, what are the key elements of the balanced pathway in your view? And just that balanced pathway, I know there's a lot of stuff in here included in this around dates and times and the likes, but how would that balanced pathway in itself contribute to the real, it's not, if you like, times that I'm interested in, it's the global temperature in the they're meeting the target of a rise to 2 degrees above pre-industrial levels. Just how do you see all that just coming together and fitting in, and the key elements of what that balanced pathway to achieving that target as opposed to a date or a time target?
Okay, thank you. So in terms of the balanced pathway, this is essentially looking at all of the different ways that different sectors can reduce emissions to get to UK net zero, and for Northern Ireland to get to at least 82%. The key in all of it is actually electrification of our lives, essentially. So the main key driver behind it is, electrification of transport, electrification of heat, buildings, etc. So that is the single biggest factor in the balanced pathway. And I don't know if you've seen the CCC diagram of the balanced pathway, but but it's quite clear the biggest chunk is. So maybe we should provide that to you. So maybe the committee would ask for that afterwards, and we will send you a copy of the graph. In every balanced pathway, there's always residual emissions left in terms of agriculture. Enteric fermentation of methane, so that's cows burping and farting in very crude terms, is always going to remain. Well, I think there are technological advancements such as feed additives which may help that, but in every pathway some of that remains. And then in order to offset those emissions, there's carbon capture and storage, and then ordinary sort of natural carbon sequestration. So the advice is that carbon capture and storage would be too costly to implement in Northern Ireland, so we would benefit on a UK-wide basis from that being put in areas with more land and better capacity to store that carbon, etc. So that's the reason for looking at it on a UK-wide basis. So that's in terms of the balanced pathway. But in terms of how the balanced pathway will help meet the global temperature or stop global temperatures rising too much, so that will be essentially what the UK's nationally determined contribution will be of getting to net zero by 2050. So the IPCC and the Paris Agreement are saying, yes, we need to get to net zero by 2050. As things move on, I think we'll start maybe even becoming a carbon sink by 2050 as the technology advances. But it's more in terms of actually meeting that temperature goal, it's about every country playing their part and doing the maximum they can. And so really, I see Northern Ireland as having a success story of getting legislation through, getting everybody bought in, and getting emissions reduced, and showing that the economy can still be protected while doing so. I actually think there's a bit of a danger of going too far, too fast, in that it costs us more, loses the will, and actually shows as a case study of why you shouldn't try to tackle emissions too quickly, which in global terms would look poor, I think, and that's very much just a personal opinion of mine and not something that's based on evidence. But I think overall, it's about, we need everybody around the world to act. UK are 1% of the emissions reductions, so the UK alone aren't going to do anything. Northern Ireland on their own aren't going to do anything. But it's about showing that people can be bought in and that there are real opportunities to doing all of this, and that's what the green growth strategy in particular is highlighting, the opportunities. I think we've been focusing too much on the sort of challenges and the dangers and some real opportunities, but I have to advise on the basis of the evidence and science that the opportunities lie in following a balanced pathway.
So can I just maybe take you back, if you could bear with me there a wee minute, please, Colin. Now, the Minister made reference earlier to, we all know it and we all see it every day in our own daily lives, the increased and exorbitant costs of fuel. And that exorbitant, the knock-on, the consequential effects, those for the supply chain and all that sort of stuff. Now, if I could maybe just, we may well be at the, if they push it any further, they'll take us faster to the tipping point in terms of people looking at alternatives. Now, I just want to bring you back to the electrification issue, right? So, how would that translate in practical terms to, we'll say, take it on farm? What measures would need to be put in place? What alternatives need to be considered? How would, we'll just talk about, it's not even, it may well arrive at the point where it's a just transition economically if ordinary fuels as we know them, those that produce the carbon, are getting exorbitantly priced out of the market, that it could be that transition point is brought upon people to do that. So what's needed to be done? What practical measures are needed to be done on farm to bring about that change in terms of electrification, in terms of measures that are required, in terms of alternatives that need to be considered by those on the farm business?
Yeah, so I will hold my hands up and say I'm no expert on some of this stuff, so it's probably maybe something for one of our food and farming group colleagues to say. But in terms of electrification, the electrification has to happen in tandem with that electric coming from renewable sources, be that hydrogen, be that biomethane, be that wind and other renewable energy sources. But electrification in conjunction with fossil fuels only compounds the problem. So, yes. So that won't work. In terms of on-farm, so like we've got, heat and power coming from electrification. Heavy machinery is the difficult one, and I don't have the answer to that. At present, but it's similar to the aviation industry. Those big, heavy machines, the amount of batteries you'd need to power them probably doesn't make it worthwhile at the minute. But there may be a solution. We've got hydrogen buses. There may be a solution on farm with hydrogen as opposed to batteries. But I'm probably saying enough there because I'm probably digging myself a hole that I don't fully understand.
No, that's grand. I appreciate your honesty there. Chair, we could probably come back to that and maybe get a bit more evidence from, as Colin suggests, there's other colleagues in the food and drink sectors who may well have some ideas around this and probably have encountered it as well. So maybe make that a suggestion for the committee at some stage, please. But thanks very much in the meantime there, Colin.
Thank you, Patsy.
Thanks, Patsy. William?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can I thank Colin and his team for his presentation on this very important issue. I, for one, am also a great believer that we should listen to the experts. We're not the experts on many issues, so we should listen to those. I'm a farmer all my life, so I do know the issues on the ground. In relation, for me, it's vital that our committee listen to the Climate Change Committee report take heed to it. And indeed the KPMG report, which has been very stark in relation to the consequences of going for net zero by 2045. You did say, Colin, that the Paris Agreement makes it clear that there should be protections in relation to food production. Can you expand on that a wee bit?
Yeah, so I will first say, in terms of the evidence, I'm likewise not an expert, but all we're doing is assessing all the evidence we got and providing our assessment on that. So the evidence is clear that at this time NI net zero is not credible. So that is why we come forward and explain that. In terms of the Paris Agreement, so it's section 2.1 of the Paris Agreement. Cites the need to protect food security while reducing emissions. So simply moving food production elsewhere doesn't protect food security because in a crisis people look after their own people first in many cases. So if there was limited food left, I think if we have more food security by producing it indigenously than offshoring it, and also we have good standards in terms of carbon footprint of our food, and we also have less distance for our food to travel if we're producing it locally. So these are all the positives in terms of food security, whilst also keeping global emissions down to a minimum. There are concerns over certain regions, let's say cutting down large swathes of very old forest to produce more beef, and that's one that certainly concerns me, and I wouldn't like to see my local butcher giving me beef from there as opposed to our local beef.
Would you accept that this committee, the Dairy Committee, has a huge responsibility in getting this right?
Oh, yeah, I think we all have a huge responsibility. I have done my part as best I can in terms of providing the evidence and drafting a bill based on that evidence. And the next stage is, I've tried to, I really want a compromise so that we can have the maximum plenary time to really discuss one bill and get, everybody on board with one bill. I can't advise against a target over and above what we have put in. But at the same time, I can't stop anything like that happening in the Assembly. That's not my role. But yeah, the committee certainly has a big responsibility to look at all this and do, as you are doing, do committee reports to just say, here's what the evidence suggests, and here's what we think. And I very much look forward to seeing those committee reports. But I think that's about all I can say on that.
Thank you, Colin. I just hope that the committee does listen to the expert advice. Thank you.
I mean, I think, William, every one of us in the committee understands how important this is and understands our own role in ensuring that we get it right. I mean, I think that goes without saying. Moving on, Rosemary.
Thank you. A lot of the questions that I was going to ask have been asked, but just one question, that's relation to the bill. The bill allows DAERA to impose reporting duties on public bodies following consultation. Why is there not a duty, a general duty on the public bodies not being included in the bill?
Okay, so this was largely taken after legal advice. So if we're placing, we place the duties on the departments because this is an executive bill. But when you're placing a duty on other public bodies, it's good practice to consult with them to help to co-design that duty and to make sure it's fit for purpose. So that was the sole reasoning behind not just placing a duty directly on public bodies. Because of the limited time frame for development of legislation, we didn't have time to consult on that provision. So that was the best outcome that we could see in conjunction with our legal experts.
Okay, right. That's okay. Thank you.
Okay, so again, Colin, Claire, internet doesn't allow her to join or ask questions, so she's sent a few in via WhatsApp for me to ask on her behalf. So, just in relation to the point that you made on when you referred to the North reducing food production being a threat to food security, I mean, we've talked about that a couple of times, you've talked about it a couple of times. I mean, what she's asking for is if the committee can have sight of the evidence that you have to make that comment?
Well, I don't think it's evidence as such. It's a simple question of supply and demand. If we don't if we don't supply it, there's still the demand, and somebody else will supply it. So we are feeding largely exporting to GB, and that's been taken into account in the overall UK net zero pathways. It's not a matter of evidence; it's a matter of sort of the common laws of economics. I know I've been asked this question before and I've given the same answer.
Yeah, I mean, and this is my own point just in that. I mean, because the economic markets change. So, I mean, I'm sitting here thinking that there's no way that the same type of foods and the quantities that they're being consumed will be the same in 2045 or 2050. So, I mean, there's an obvious conclusion to draw with that those markets that are best prepared for the evolution of the market will thrive than those that are strictly sticking to something that they think will be the same in 30 years' time when it quite clearly won't be.
Yeah, well, I completely agree with you, Philip, on everything you have said. The issue here in Northern Ireland, as I'm sure you will know, is that the nature of our land is that it is largely only good for grassland, for grazing of livestock and the like. So while diets will change, and the farming sector still has an awful lot to do in this balanced pathway, it's not business as usual by any means. And in the balanced pathway, there is an area built in for behaviour change where consumers will eat less meat. I've seen a recent story saying that in the last decade, there's about 20% less red meat consumed than there was a decade ago. But it's important to recognise we have our strength here in Northern Ireland of producing livestock. We're still only producing animal proteins for 10 million people. So regardless of, I would say, how much diets change, unless there's some insane level of shift, there will still be the requirement for several millions of people to be eating animal protein by 2045. But I completely agree with everything you're saying, but I probably disagree that Northern Ireland agriculture or a major part of the Northern Ireland economy needs to be damaged at this stage. As those things change, maybe the minister has spent a lot of money on the protein crop scheme. So in Northern Ireland, people are looking at changes. These take time, and my feeling is the best way to maybe bring forward that change and to let people start planting protein crops and growing them and all the rest is for us to have a target that they all buy into, and then change happens organically rather than change being forced. And again, I'm going to beat the same drum again. I really want a compromise where that all happens, where everybody gets brought along. I don't want anybody feeling that there's a lack of ambition. I don't want anybody feeling that there's too much ambition and it's going to ruin their lives. That's where a compromise is ideal, and I can't see any situation better for a compromise than climate change. Something that doesn't respect parties or borders or anything else. We can all show just a genuine commitment to all working together, because we're going to have to work together very hard over the next 25, 30 and well beyond years to tackle this.
Okay. Just another point made by Claire. You had mentioned that in Scotland doesn't have just transition in its primary legislation. She's pointing out that it actually does in section 35 of
Sorry, that wasn't my point. My point was that the Just Transition Commission wasn't established in legislation in Scotland. I'm aware there's just transition principles in the Scottish legislation, and indeed, if we were to look at a compromise, we would certainly look at those just transition principles and see if what the intent was and what has been the outcome of them by working with officials in Scotland, as we do transboundary all over these islands, and actually see what could be gained from them. So it's not that it's the Just Transition Commission that is being set up in green growth was set up without legislation in Scotland as well. So sorry if that point wasn't understood correctly.
Fair enough. Just on the last point that she wanted to make to you was that, I mean, obviously a lot of stock is put on the CCC advice, but the CCC did give a tailwind scenario of the North hitting or setting a 95% target. So, you know, I suppose the question she's asking following on from that is why did you not go beyond the 82% and set the 95% target?
Well, what we've said is an at least 82% target, and that is the balanced pathway. You know, the tailwind scenario is something that we could look at after we start seeing real action, I believe. You know, I think we need to get started on this, and you know, the tailwind scenario does assume an awful lot of things going in our favour. And you know, at present we haven't even got legislation going in our favour. So we did look at that. At the minute, you know, our recommendation would be the balanced pathway. You know, there's the tailwind scenarios, a bit of ambition and a bit of luck. And yes, you know, we put huge emphasis on the CCC advice. You know, I think it's important to say, you know, a lot of people put huge emphasis on the IPCC advice, but you know, some of the same authors of the IPCC report actually work for the Climate Change Committee as well. So I think we're all on the same page, but we all have slightly different desires on how we get there. And again, I will say that's where a compromise should hopefully look at all that, rather than, you know, spending a huge amount of committee time scrutinising 2 bills, doing 2 reports. You know, if we could all come together, and you know, I noted the Minister's comments were very positive around compromise and getting sensible amendments and all the rest. So yeah, but you know, ultimately I have to say the CCC is the established independent expert. It was established by the executive, or established for Northern Ireland by the executive. So they are the body that provide us with the advice, and you know, I feel we should be listening to it.
Okay, Colin, I'm going to leave it there. So I just want to thank you and Arlene and Anthony for coming along and giving that. No doubt we will have you back discussing the same subject in the future. So once again, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Philip. Thank you very much, committee. Great to present today.
Okay, so I'm just going to move on, or actually there was a couple of things there maybe out of that there briefing that we maybe could potentially decide to take forward. Colin, when he was talking and answered questions about the targets within the department and the oversight of that and the enforcement of that, did suggest that maybe that was the subject, or needed to be the subject of a separate briefing. So, I mean, I'm not sure if that's something that members would like to see, either in written or oral form, a separate briefing on that particular subject. Nobody's dissenting, so happy enough. And then the other thing, just in relation to the potential Barnett consequentials by not following the CC advice, it might be useful to potentially write to the Finance Department first, or the Treasury, but whichever is the most appropriate method, just in relation to seeking clarification on that point as well. So, okay, we're just going to move on. I think I've been using incorrect numbers in terms of the agenda. I think I've been one behind all the way along. So we're moving on next to the Horse Racing Amendment Bill and consideration of the draft report. So members of the committee will... So we're now going to consider the draft report and the Horse Racing Amendment Bill. So I refer members to the draft bill report on page 131 of your meeting packs. So if everybody is content, I'm going to proceed through the draft report, seeking the committee's consent or comments after each section. So we will begin at section 2. Section 1 merely provides details of the committee's membership and the powers of the committee as set out in the Good Friday Agreement. So section 2 now of the bill can be found on page 134 of the draft report. It is an executive summary of the committee stage of the bill and provides a general overview of the committee's considerations. So I'm just going to allow just a few moments for members to look through paragraphs 1 to 7. Okay, so again, as always, members, if you have anything that you want, or any points you want to raise, just stick it into the group chat. But so I'm going to ask if members are content with section 2. Okay. Section 3 then of the bill can be found at page 135 of the draft report. It is an introduction and provides an overview of the purposes of the bill. It's paragraph 8 and 9. I'll just allow a few moments just for members to again go through it again. I mean, we've obviously went through this prior to today, but this is just a matter of signing off on it. So I'm going to ask if members are content with the paragraphs 8 and 9 in section 3. Okay, thank you. So section 4 of the bill can be found at page 136 of the draft report. It describes contextual information in relation to the horse racing industry and activity at Down Royal and Downpatrick racecourses. So it's basically, section 4 is paragraphs 10 to 19. So I'll allow just a few moments for members to run their eye over it again. Okay, so once again, I'm just going to ask if members are content with section 4. Michael Orr, okay, thank you. So moving on then to section 5 of the bill, it can be found at page 138 of the draft report. It is a detailed explanation of the horse racing fund, and it's paragraphs 20 to 27 of the draft report. So I'll allow a few moments just to. Okay, so I'm just going to ask the question again, if members are content with section 5 of the draft report. All is good. Thank you. So moving on then, section 6 of the bill can be found at page 139 of the draft report. It describes the issues with the 1990 order and the impact on both racecourses from being unable to access fund payments. So it's paragraphs 28 to 34, and I'll just allow a few moments to run your eye over that again. Okay, so are members content with section 6 of the draft report? Thank you. So moving on then, section 7 is a summary of the bill and can be found at page 141 of the draft report. It's paragraphs 35 to 49. Okay, members, are we all content with section 7? Okay. Section 8 of the bill can be found at page 144 of the draft report. It outlines the committee's consideration of the bill, covering bill timeline, the briefings that we have heard from RAISE, clarifications on the bill received from DAERA, or call for evidence, or call for evidence activities. oral evidence received from Downpatrick and Down Royal. So that's paragraphs 50 to 105. Patsy, you have a question?
There, I'm up. Yep.
That's you now, Patsy.
But I raised, and I'm not sure if it's contained here, in terms of the implementation of the bill. And I know the people from the racecourse did raise it with us. The whole issue of those potential for retrospection of the balance of payment that they saw that was due to them as a result of this, that they'd been disadvantaged over a period of time. I don't know whether or if that's reflected in this report, yes.
Okay, I'm just going to ask Nick to come in and answer that, Patsy.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Patsy. Yes, indeed, we did include that provision that was agreed last week. So following the meeting last week, we formally wrote to the department seeking clarity on whether there would be any facilitation of historical payments either through this bill as enacted or if there would be other means of doing that. So we
Yes, that's it.
Okay.
The department haven't come back yet?
We're yet to receive a response in writing from the department. As soon as we do, we'll table it, but that action from the committee is included in the report.
Happy, Patsy? Okay, thank you. So if I can just ask then members with that clarification if they're content with section 8 of the draft report? Okay, good stuff. So moving on then. Section 9 of the bill can be found at page 158 of the draft report. It sets out the committee's deliberations of the bill, which were supported by DAERA officials and representatives of the bill office. It's paragraphs 106 to 119. Okay, members, are you all content with section 9 then of the draft report? Nodding there. Okay, section 10. You're unmuted, Patsy. Section 10 of the bill can be found at page 161 of the draft report. So it details the committee's clause by clause scrutiny of the bill. Paragraphs 120 to 129. Just take a wee minute or two to flick through that again. Yep, so I mean this is all stuff that we went through in fine detail. So can I just again ask for confirmation that the committee are content with section 10 of the draft report? Okay, thank you. Section 11 of the bill can be found at page 162 of the draft report, and it gives a breakdown of the wider policy issues and recommendations. It's one paragraph, 130. So, members, are we all content with section 11 of the draft report? Thank you. So, if the committee are content with all the sections as outlined of the report, I'm just going to put the following question. Members, given that the committee has agreed all sections of the draft report, I will put the question that the Committee for Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs agrees the draft report on the Horse Racing Amendment Bill and agrees that it be published. Okay, thank you, members. So, members, page 164 of your packs is a draft summary report of the bill. It is intended as a snapshot of the main report and will provide a breakdown of the salient points of the committee's consideration. The clerk has suggested that the committee could publish this on social media alongside its full report as a means of making our work more accessible here in the committee to members of the public. So, can I ask members for your thoughts on this, and should we publish? Everybody happy? I mean, I think it's a good idea, it's a good suggestion. It's important that we do make ourselves accessible, but it's also important, I suppose, that the public out there can get in a bite-sized, accessible way the work that we are doing. So nobody has to sentence. So I'm going to suggest that we do that. I just want to thank members for their time and effort in progressing this bill. So we're just moving on now to item 10, our correspondence. And can I refer members to correspondence, which is at page 168 in your packs. So just a few points from that. Page 171 of your reports, of your packs, is a report by Belfast Chamber of Trade and Commerce and BDO outlining the views of businesses operating in Belfast on the importance and impact of climate change. So the correspondence includes an offer to brief the committee. So I suppose, I mean, as a committee then we need to make a decision. Are we content to note the correspondence, and does the committee wish to have a briefing? Any thoughts on it? I mean, I don't know if other members listened in or took part in the conference last Friday that was organised jointly by the Chamber of Commerce across the north and the similar organisation in the south that was attended by the joint ministers, First Ministers and Taoiseach. So it might mean obviously Belfast is only one city, an important city, but it might be worth maybe incorporating the Belfast city into a wider meeting under the umbrella of the North Chamber of Commerce, if people thought that was appropriate. Everybody's happy? Can I suggest that then?
Certainly, Chair.
Okay, thank you. So, members, also in terms of correspondence, I'd like to draw your attention to page 215 in your pack. It's a response from Farmers for Action in respect of the legal queries raised regarding the potential introduction of a farm welfare bill. So can I ask members, just obviously you'll have read it, can we note this response and if any further action is required? People happy enough just to note the correspondence? Yep, okay, thank you. So at page 217 of your packs is an invitation to all of us from the UFU and DERA for members to partake in an online climate change conference. It's scheduled for the 27th of October. So any member wishing to attend can find the registration details in the written invitation and should respond directly. Hopefully we'll all be on that. So we will. So just then, with regard to the rest of the correspondence, our members can tend to action the rest of it as suggested on the index sheet on page 168. Happy enough? Thank you. Moving on then to the forward work programme, can I refer members to the to the draft forward work programme at page 223 and seek agreement unless there's any comments or questions on the draft work programme. Draft forward work programme. Okay, thank you. We'll definitely be busy over the autumn and winter months. So then AOB, so I think Rosemary, perhaps you had wanted to raise an item under any other business. Do you want to come in now? Go ahead, Rosemary.
No, I spoke with Nick earlier in the week about that. Nick didn't.
Chair, thank you. Yes, indeed, Rosemary. So it was just to raise under any other business following the committee's event with the Ulster Farmers Union last Wednesday evening. At the invitation of the UFU, I believe there was a question raised with regards to the policies and initiatives that are in place to encourage women in rural communities to take on the role of managing on farms and farm management, and decided to raise it under any other business today with a suggestion to write to the department and other relevant stakeholders to seek what strategies and initiatives they have in place to help support and encourage women living and working on farms to move towards farm management. I suppose it was just to seek the committee's approval to proceed on that.
You happy enough with that assessment, Rosemary?
Oh, yes, yeah.
Okay, I mean, I think it's a very good idea. I thank Rosemary for bringing it to the committee's attention, and I mean, I would suggest that we follow up with that.
Thank you.
Claire's also just put into the group chat there. Can we ask for a report on the current status of women in farming as well? Along with that, yep, no reason why we can't. Claire, thank you.
Chair, yes, I'll include that within the correspondence that goes out for those entities to provide information and data on the current status.
Thank you to both Claire and Rosemary for raising those issues. So, members, any other member have anything else they want to raise before we move on? No? Sorry, go on ahead, Nick. You want to come on?
Chair, thank you. Thank you, Chair. It's just to raise with members that we have been the committee has been very kindly invited at the invitation of the department on the morning of the 28th of October to visit the Peatlands Park down, I believe it's near Dungannon. So I haven't got an official proposed timetable for that visit, but I understand that members have been invited to attend the Peatlands Park, view part of the park, and it would give members an opportunity to hear about the upcoming peatland strategy and various initiatives that they are undertaking with regards nature restoration on the park. So it was really just to highlight and flag that to members has been put forward informally, and I know the diaries are exceptionally busy, but to try and hold that time for Thursday the 28th in the morning if possible, and whenever I have further firm details I'll obviously let you know.
Sorry, Thursday 28th of
October, sorry.
Will that clash with the committee?
No, because that's during the Halloween recess, Chair.
Yeah, I forgot we get holidays. Very good. No bar. Okay, so thank you, Nick, for that, and we'll get more details then of that. So next item then essentially is date, time and place of next meeting. So that will be this afternoon. We don't get long of a break, so we're meeting at 1:30, and that'll be a virtual meeting which will not be streamed on the Assembly website. So thank you, members. We're just now going to move on to closed session.
Committee room 30.